Hey guys, my name is Alex Barham. Sometimes I see things in the boating culture that I just want to take a pause and visit and look at and take a dive on. Long time ago when I first got into paddling, there was just a handful of rules of the road that everyone kind of knew and respected, and they've kind of just gone away. And one of the huge ones is buying and selling used safety gear. Specifically, you really shouldn't do it. The other thing, which was brought to me by a number of kind of veterans in the field as something that's also just lost along the way and should be revisited, is when do you replace helmets, PFDs, ropes, safety gear? A lot of people seem to be using them long beyond what is appropriate and safe. For starters, a lot of people think that I work for a boat shop. I do not. I have a 9-to-5, and my 9-to-5 is environmental health and safety. Basically, what that means is I take regulations, guidelines, best practices from state, the feds, whoever, break it down, apply it, explain it to people, make it understandable and followable for a good chunk of money. So let's take that approach and dive into safety gear. There are a number of different engineering groups that come up with what the needs of a piece of safety gear are, how they're going to test for that to make sure that a piece of gear meets that standard, and then setting a standard for which everything should meet a minimum requirement. All of this helmet testing is designed to be standardized. So it's done in a lab, it's repeatable, it's measurable. Helmet testing as defined in the standard is really only to see if the outer shell cracks. In reality, most quality testing that is done today is done with all sorts of sensors and gadgetry so that you can really understand the amount of force that's being transferred into the body. Is it going to shift your brain inside your skull? Is it going to break your neck? All of that kind of stuff. One of the things that the standards really fail to do is all they're saying is if you drop the helmet with this much weight in it this far and it hits an object twice, does the helmet crack? You know, the English standard adds a little bit about strappage to make sure it stays put on your head. But if you look at, and I'll insert a video here, the way that a lot of the helmets are actually tested from really high-end companies. The footage I'm using is from the Gyro factory. They are going above and beyond, and they're really doing their job. But you can see they are modeling for very specific impacts. We in the whitewater field may or may not see those impacts. By the same token, if you take something from outside of winter sports or paddle sports, these tests have never been done, and this never went into the design of the helmet. They were going for other factors completely. From there, a manufacturer wanting to make a piece of gear that keeps you safe for that application is going to look at the standard, build something, make their own in-house test for it. When they have something that meets or exceeds it that they're happy with, they then pay that group to test it in their lab, and then you can have your stuff stamped by them. So, unfortunately, I just talked about a lot of stuff that came down to money. Money, money, money. Now, because of the huge expense, no one has ponied up the cash, which is really unfortunate, to get a ASTM, which is the American gold standard of a safety stamp, okay? You will find ASTM or ANSI stamped onto every piece of safety gear that you can imagine in a construction site. You will find their stuff all over the place in other motorsports and sporting safety equipment, but you will not find it on whitewater gear. Why? Because it takes a lot of money to A, establish the standard, and then B, build and test for it. And unfortunately, there just aren't enough helmets sold to defer that cost. So what they have done is they've looked for a close standard to go and meet. So what they've used is the snow sports standard. Obviously, that's not amazing, but it does at least set a bench to clear. Now, there's also a European standard, which does pertain to water sports. And yes, certain brands are meeting or exceeding that, although I've looked at a number of helmets and you don't actually often see their stamp. So even though they may be in-house testing, they might not be sending out to get it tested. So first thing, when you're buying a helmet, look at this stuff. So just for kicks, this is my brand new helmet. As I unbox it, we are gonna go and we are gonna look at the tag on the side of the helmet. This is a great place if you're wondering when something should be replaced, what the general care and requirements are. Sexy carbon fiber, love it. Just like that tag on the mattress that it's illegal to remove before it's sold, they're required to send you certain information. So in this little booklet that's attached, you should be able to find basic care maintenance and when this thing's supposed to be replaced as per the manufacturer. Derp de derp. It's sort of in the fine print, but right there under user instructions, it explains exactly what I just told you. Check every time. If anything's wrong, you replace it. The other cool thing about these is you can see what standard it was tested to. So in this case, Trident was tested to the only actual water sport standard. So right here on this sticker, Trident was made by NRS, it was tested to this standard. Here's the lab that tested it, met the standard. PFDs, on the other hand, are very simple. The US Coast Guard sets a standard. Everyone builds to the standard. The Coast Guard tests for the standard. To sell a PFD, you legally have to have a stamp that says that you met that standard. Easy peasy. The only thing that can be complicated about it is to be a type 3, you have to have, I think, 8 pounds of flotation. To be a type 5, you have to have 15. I'll put it right here what you need to have. All right, so that's how you manufacture a safe piece of gear and bring it to the market to sell, right? But from there, what happens to it? When do you replace it? This is also very clear. It's not only spelled out in the standard, but then it's also mirrored by most helmet manufacturers. Basically what it comes down to is 3 years of normal use, no nicks, cracks, dings, or anything which could compromise the integrity of the shell, no visible damage anywhere in any part of the helmet, the straps, the buckles, foam, anything. And also, you cannot expose it to environmental conditions which could degrade the helmet. So very key one being 150 degrees. Well, that means that if you left your gear in a hot car on a summer day, you could cook your gear, degrade the shell of the helmet, and then it's not really good anymore. So right off the bat, I am sure that some of you have already said, my stuff doesn't meet that threshold. Well, get rid of it. Get rid of it. That's all there is to it. Just get rid of it. Similarly, the Coast Guard standard for a PFD is it should have the rated amount of flotation, no visible damage, no sun decay, nothing that could indicate that the systems of the PFD will fail. That's pretty simple. So let's take a look at a couple pieces of my old gear that I saved so I could make this video and show what acceptable and unacceptable damage looks like. This is my old PFD. Had it for, I think, 2 or so years, and I've put a lot of days on it. And not only that, but I'm a boater, okay? It has ridden around the top of my truck, it's been in the sun, and you know, before the end of this season, I kind of had a moment where I stopped and said, I don't think this is floating me the way it used to, and there's definitely visible damage. I could squeak it out to the end of the season, but I shouldn't. And that is an appropriate response, all right? So let's just take a quick look. So first of all, if we look right on the front, there's visible sun degrading. And then in other spots, there are small nicks and tears. Just basically signs, I mean, you can see on the zipper right there, there are just signs of wear. It's just self-evident looking at this thing that I've put more than 100 days onto this, and it's starting to wear out. It really doesn't take much. I mean, little things like the straps in the back are starting to get wonky. All of these things in a rescue vest are indicative that that piece of gear is shot. Anytime I'm wearing that vest, it inherently means that I am wearing it for the specific reason that I might use it to save my own life or somebody else's life. That is the thread on which my life hangs. Worst case, multiple lives hang. It has to be a pristine, perfect piece of gear. It just has to be. And honestly, looking at you raft guides, if I owned a rafting company and you showed up with a completely sun-faded, beat up, torn PFD, you wouldn't go on the river. There are a dozen people whose lives depend on you, and this is what you bring to the equation. That's like a taxi driver showing up drunk.
Now, when it comes to replacing a PFD, one of the most important things is that it actually has the flotation it needs to have. If you've never seen someone almost drown because they're using an 8-year-old PFD and it doesn't float anymore, trust me, it's horrifying. You also need to make sure, just for your own safety, that if you are like me and you are packing in a bunch of safety gear, that you're weight conscious. If you overload and start suddenly carrying 2-3 pounds of junk in that PFD, you've taken 2-3 pounds of flotation away from the vest. So, you know, my whole rescue kit weighs less than a pound. The vest is over the minimum threshold by more than that. I'm still good. That's the sort of thing you should be thinking about with PFD. If you're not sure if it's good anymore, go find something that weighs the amount that it's supposed to be able to float, clip it to the PFD and throw it in a pool. See if it floats. If it doesn't, it's junk. Get rid of it.
So by the same token, here's my old helmet. Now, it might look perfectly good. It may or may not be, but there's only one way to find out, right? So you don't wait for it to fail. You replace it before it goes bad. The reason I replaced this one is there is a solid chip out of the top. I don't even remember taking a hit, but once I saw that chip, I started inspecting the inside, and in the WRSI triple layer system, so there's the shell, there's foam, there's this second shell, and then there's the inner layer. I don't know if you can see that, but when I flex, there's a crack right here. So clearly at some point, I took a whack that was harder than I really thought it was. And I mean, just the fact that I can make that noise with the helmet, I'm done with it. I don't know if it could take a second big hit. Odds are it could, but what if that hit was bigger than I thought it would be? How am I supposed to know how bad I'm gonna screw up? The other scenario that happens a lot, and this especially happens to buyers, is what if there's just a piece of gear that's been sitting on the shelf for a really long time? Maybe it got really light use. This is a old helmet that I used actually as a mold to make other helmets. And it, by all accounts, looks perfectly good. Shell's in good shape. Everything about it's fine. But I think it's like 7 or 8 years old. This plastic, there's just no telling how good it is or isn't anymore. Oh, I don't know if you can hear that on the mic, but if hang on.
Crap. Well, apparently I just curb stomped my microphone cable out of existence. But when I gave a stomp on this helmet, yeah, it broke right off. So, point proven, right? Just because something hasn't had a lot of use on it, if it's old enough, plastic degrades. Unfortunately, whitewater helmets don't meet the same standard that a hard hat does. This is my hard hat from work. Right inside of it, there is stamped extremely clearly, right there, a little clock. That tells me the month and year that it was born. 3 years from that date, this thing has to be retired. If it's literally an OSHA violation, if it's not. Last example before I beat this horse to death are throw ropes, okay? Now, throw ropes are more complicated than they might seem because there's really a variety of different lives that a rope could have had. It could have just been bouncing around in the bottom of somebody's boat forever. It could have been in the sun on the back of a raft forever. It could have never been used. It could have been used once and there was a pin, there was a Z-drag, someone hyperextended that rope, and it might look brand new from the bag, but the rope inside of it might be shot. Really, don't buy used ropes, almost ever. Unless you personally know the person and you know the history of that piece of gear, it's not safe to be used for a Z-drag. If you're only going to use it as a throw line, maybe, but my personal experience is even the bags that I was like, oh, I would never pull a Z-drag off that. I wound up pulling Z-drags off of them because stuff happens and you have to work with the gear you have in a rescue, right? Case in point, this is a bag, I mean, just from the fact that it says Lotus on it, you should know that I've had this thing forever. Forever. I don't even know where it came from, but from 10 feet away, it might look fine. You look close, there is some discoloration. I know the history of this rope. I do still use this rope from time to time. Never ever be sold or used by anyone but me, because I know that it's had a lot of trees pulled out of places with it, and it doesn't have anymore, even though it looks big and sturdy. Now, sometimes you have the opposite end of the spectrum, okay? This is a bag that was left in one of my boats. I don't know when, but it's super obviously discolored. It's ratty, it's awful, it's shot. It literally, I think it's going in the trash after today. I was just keeping it around for the sake of an example. Now, a lot of people might have one of those around as loaner gear. That goes for all of this stuff. This is not acceptable as loaner gear. You can't just loan someone something that you know is no good. You know, they're better off safe on shore than at risk in the river with junk. By the same token, if you are selling this stuff, I mean, the last couple of months, I have seen some ratty gear go up for sale. $75 for a used PFD that you know is shot. I don't care if you're giving somebody a deal, you're screwing them. By the same token, don't just lie and say that something has 2 seasons and it has 1 season left when it's clearly shot. All you're doing is putting some beginner in a horrible situation because they don't know better. And who really is going to probably use that safety gear to the max and their life is going to depend on it? Beginners. So shame on you. You're a schmuck if you do that. Last and final thing for today. People using non-whitewater gear as whitewater gear, all right? Specifically helmets. I gave you the skinny, man. There is not a good standard for whitewater gear. That said, the companies that are making whitewater gear are doing their job and they are testing far and beyond what the actual minimum threshold set in the standard would be. They are making good helmets. If you go out there and you say, I've got a lacrosse helmet in my garage, I've got a hockey helmet, I've got a hard hat. Well, none of those things are designed for that use, tested for that use, any of them. Another sport helmet is in no way designed for this. Not only are you taking a piece of gear and subjecting it to potential impacts that it is in no way designed or rated for, but there are a lot of other ripple effects that you probably haven't thought about that could happen. So, classic example, when Sweet started making ski helmets, a lot of people said, hey, I only need 1 helmet now. I'm gonna go buy the snow version and I'm gonna use it all year. Well, what they didn't think through was the padding inside was different. So what they wound up with was a really heavy waterlogged helmet in the summer. If you add all of that weight, when you do take a hit on something, that could compound the force that you're hitting the rock with. And suddenly, what should have been a, normal hit could be a huge hit. And it could literally break your neck. By the same token, I've seen a bunch of private rafter guys running around with cowboy hat hard hats on their heads. Okay, even if you add a strap system to this cage on the inside is only designed and rated to be hit this way. Once. Okay? So if you get yourself into trouble, you're screwed. And you did it to yourself. I'll be the first to admit that it sucks having to buy new gear when you feel like you still have stuff that seems okay. And not only that, but that you build personal attachments to some of your gear. I mean, case in point, I still have this helmet that I made for myself. I wore it forever until someone pointed out to me how dumb that was. A, I had had it for a really long time. And B, you built the helmet in your garage? So, yeah, I have it. It kicks around. I might put it on the wall somewhere. I don't know. But I certainly have other pieces of gear that mean a lot to me on the wall. And that's a perfectly acceptable place for them, you know? Leave them there, not on the river. But this is me climbing off my soapbox, and I'll see you later.